Okay, so today is 11th April 2025, and let's try to understand what is the update on US China tariff war here. Okay, so first of all, we can come to ChatGPT here. Okay, and here I can write here, please give me an update on US China tariff war. So as of April 11th, 2025, the trade tensions between the USA and China have intensified. On April 10th, President Donald Trump announced a 90-day pause on most reciprocal tariffs. Okay, so the tariff they announced previously, they have did a 90-day pause, aiming to secure more favorable trade agreements for the US. However, this pause does not extend to China. Instead, tariffs on Chinese goods have been increased to 125%, with the White House later clarifying that the effective rate is 145%. Okay, so you can check the source here. Source is New York Post and AP News. Okay, so AP News is giving this particular part here. See, you can see the highlighted part, and New York Post give this part. Okay, so the part of this one that the effective rate would be 145%. This information is given by AP News. Okay, so whether to trust it or not trust it, make sure to do it based on source here. In retaliation, China has imposed a 84% tariff on US imports effective immediately and has pledged to follow through to the end if the US insists on continuing the trade war. This was given by AI Jazeera. These escalating tariffs have led to significant market volatility. The S&P 500 fell by 3.5%, the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 2.5%, and the Nasdaq declined 4.3%. Asian markets have also been affected, with Japan's Nikkei 225 plunging by 5.6%. Okay, so then we have Treasury Security Besant, Scott Bessent has emerged as a central figure in the administration's trade strategies, tasked with negotiating bespoke agreements with approximately 75 countries during the 90-day tariff pause. This approach aims to eliminate trade barriers and address the US trade deficit. Despite these efforts, business leaders remain concerned about the uncertainty surrounding long-term trade policies, which complicates investment and hiring decisions. The situation remains fluid, and further development are anticipated as both nations continue their negotiation. Okay, now we can dig even deeper as well. But before that, what we can do, we can write here something like this. Give me a timeline, recent timeline. Give me a recent timeline of how tariffs or actions, let's write simply actions, how actions, what actions, give me a recent timeline of what actions are taken by both countries against each other since Trump announced tariffs. So it will give me a recent timeline here. Now once again it is asking me for these responses here. Okay, you can select the response. So this is a proper timeline it is given to me. Okay, so this one is from April 10th and this one is from April 3rd. I think I prefer more of this second response here. Let's go with second response. Okay, so what is here? Let's try to understand this response here. So here is a recent timeline of key actions taken by the US and China in the current phase of tariff war since President Trump announced the renewed tariffs in early April 2025. So on April 3rd, 2025, Trump announced new tariffs. President Trump announces sweeping tariffs on Chinese goods, increasing them up to 125%, with the White House later confirming they would effectively hit 145%. Okay, so this happened later on, but on April 3rd, Trump announces new tariffs. Okay, what happens on April 5th, 2025? China warns of retaliation. So Chinese Ministry of Commerce warns that the US move is irrational and vows retaliation if the tariffs go into effect. Chinese officials signal they are prepared for a prolonged confrontation. Then on April 8, 2025, China imposes retaliatory tariffs. In direct response, China imposes 84% tariffs on US goods, especially targeting US agriculture, tech, and energy exports. The new Chinese tariff takes immediate effect. Then on April 9, 2025, US market reacts sharply. So stock market tumble globally. So S&P 500 fall. It is negative 3.5%. Dow Jones negative 2.5%. Nasdaq negative 4.3%. Nikkei 2025 Japan negative 5.6%. Okay, so these are the major markets which fall down. Then on April 10, 2025, Trump pauses tariffs on other countries. Okay, so Trump announces a 90-day pause on most tariffs except for China, signaling a strategy to pressure China while negotiating with allies. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is tasked with cutting individual trade deals with 75 nations. This move attempts to isolate China diplomatically and economically. Okay. Then on April 11, 2025, Chinese premier holds a press briefing stating that they will follow through to the end if the US continues escalating. China begins exploring supply chain alternatives and encouraging domestic companies to reduce reliance on US exports. This timeline reflects just the first wave of policy moves and counter moves. More developments are expected as the 90-day pause unfolds and trade negotiations on or further escalation take place. Okay, so it is giving me that whether you want visuals or not. Okay, but what I want here is that I want to dig even more deeper and I want to know more about this, that what happened after Trump did a 90-day tariff. Okay, so how stock market reacted after Trump did a 90-day pause on tariffs. So I want to understand from the stock market perspective as well as an investor. Okay. So after President Donald Trump announced the 90-day pause on most tariffs, excluding China, on April 10, 2025, the stock market has a mixed reaction. Okay, mostly negative due to the continued escalation with China. Here is a breakdown. Okay, so according to that, S&P 500 fell by 3.5%, Dow Jones dropped 2.5%, Nasdaq declined by 4.3%, Asian market followed, Nikkei 2025 dropped 5.6%, Hang Seng Hong Kong fall by 4%. Okay, so why the sell-off? Although the pause remained positive, markets saw it as a selective move that intensified pressure on China, raising fears of prolonged economic friction, a sign of policy inconsistency which rattled investor confidence, a trigger for global supply chain fears, especially for companies dependent on China. Okay, so that is here as well. Now, this kind of information we can confirm as well. I can go to mutual funds and here we have the stocks here. Okay, and we can go to all indices. So yesterday Indian market was closed because of Mahashivratri, but we have the global indices here. So you can check here. See, Dow Jones 0.90%, Nasdaq, all of them are in negative. Okay, all of them are in negative here. Dow 2.50%. Okay, so that is here. So you can see here Dow Jones 2 negative 2.5%. Okay, so that is what we have here, and that is how you can see here that market was still very volatile. Investors are concerned about pressure on China. Okay, so that is here as well. Now we can dig even deeper as well. Okay, and try to think about future as well and ask ChatGPT about the future as well. Okay, so for the future perspective, we can say so we can ask that what China can do in this situation. Say we already know Trump announces tariffs, then China retaliate, but then Trump did a move and he pauses 90-day tariffs on other countries and only pressuring China. Okay, so now what China might do or can do in these kind of situations here. Okay, what China can do if it is the only country being pressured. Okay, what leverage do they have? Okay, so we can ask like this one. Okay, so great question. If China is the only country being targeted with aggressive tariffs while other nations are spared, like in Trump's 90-day pause, it does limit China's diplomatic cover. Okay, but China still has quite a bit of leverage, both economic and geopolitical. Here is how they can play their hand. So what can happen in the future? Now, once again, this is ChatGPT. ChatGPT is giving you best according to its own knowledge, according to what it know. Okay, so please see it from that perspective here. So point number one, retaliatory tariff already in place. So China is already doing retaliatory tariff here. China slapped 84% tariff on US goods, hitting key American exports: soybean, corn, beef, LNG, and tech hardware. This is designed to pressure US farmers and manufacturers, creating domestic pushback on Trump's policies. Then the second thing, dumping US treasuries. Okay, see, China is one of the largest foreign holders of US debt. Okay, if it sells off large amount of treasuries, it could increase US borrowing cost. Okay, and it can rattle global market. But this is the point here to focus on. See this one, risky for China too, as it could hurt the value of its own dollar denominated assets. See what is happening here, that China holds US debts. Okay, now when the China will dump these US treasuries here, there will be more flow of US dollars in the market. Okay, so the value of US dollars will decrease. Okay, so when the value of US dollars will decrease, okay, it will hurt the value of its own dollar denominated assets. Okay, because they have a lot of assets in dollars. Okay, when the value of dollar will decrease, their value, the dollar denominated assets, their value will also decrease here. Okay, and it will increase US borrowing cost. See, when US dollar will have uh, when US dollar will have more uh, when US dollar will have uh, more dollars in the market. Okay, then it will increase their borrowing cost as well. Okay, so that is what as well can happen as well. Okay, now currency devaluation. So that is the third thing they can do. China could let the UN weaken too. Okay, so this way they can offset the tariff cost. So if they have the tariff cost, they can offset the tariff cost by having they can print more money. Okay, China can print more yuan, and hence they can weaken it. This will offset tariff cost, and they can keep the exports competitive. See, if they print more yuan, the yuan currency will decrease. Okay, the yuan currency will decrease, and when the value of yuan will decrease, they can sell their product even more easily in the exports here. On the other hand, if they try to do the if they try to sell off US treasuries, it will hurt the US economy. Okay, because they are selling the US debt here. But on the other hand, it will increase the value of US dollars as well. And if the value of US dollars is increasing, then obviously, as comparison to yuan, yuan's value is increasing. Now, when the value of yuan is increasing, it will be even more difficult for China to sell, export. Okay. On the other hand, if they are doing currency devaluation, then it will keep their export competitive. But this also has its downsides. Okay, it can trigger the capital outflow. Okay, so that can happen, and inflation can happen in their own country as well. Okay, then what else can they do? They can strengthen their ties with other trade partners. Okay, so China can pivot more aggressively to ASEAN, Africa, and Latin America, Europe, which is also wary of Trump's trade policies. Pushes for RCEP. So China can also push for RCEP as well, which is Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and Belt and Road Initiative gains more urgency. Okay, so China already have this Belt and Road initiatives, and they can be more urgent on that as well. Okay, then what else can they do? They can target US companies as well. They might target US companies. So China can make life difficult for Apple, Tesla, Boeing, and Intel, who depend on Chinese markets. Okay, regulatory scrutiny, delays, antitrust probes, etc. These are what they can do. Consumers could also be nudged towards boycott or domestic alternatives. That can happen as well. Then this one as well, rare earth export restrictions. See, China controls around 60 to 70% of global rare earths, which are used in electronics, EVs, and defense. Okay, so if they could restrict exports to the US, which would disrupt high-tech manufacturing, and it could hurt military supply chains as well. Now, so these are the things they can do. So what is the bottom line? Bottom line is that even if diplomatically isolated in this specific trade, China is far from powerless. Okay, their strategies will likely blend economic pain for the US, especially in the battleground states, resilience building at home. Okay, so because see, if China try to do the above things, it will hurt US economy, and when it will hurt US economy, then in the midterm it could create problem for the US. Okay, because see, US has its import tariffs on China, and which will create inflation for its own people. Okay, who will pay the price of tariffs? Okay, eventually American consumers will need to pay the price of those tariffs as well, along with the price of actual product. Okay, so that means inflation will rise for the American people. Okay, that is one thing. Okay, on the other hand, if China actually tries to uh, sell off the US debt, then it can create economic recession for the US. Okay, that can happen as well. Then in the midterm, it could create problems. Okay, in the midterm elections, it could create problems for the Republican Party here, for the Donald Trump. Okay, geopolitical balancing to avoid full isolation. Okay, so that is here as well. Okay, and so that is what can happen here. Okay, and now China is also giving me an option here. Want a strategic playbook of what both sides might do next if this escalates into a prolonged standoff. So let's try to see this one as well. Yes, please. I want a strategic playbook. So let's see here. Absolutely, here is a strategic playbook outlining what both the US and China could do next if this trade standoff escalates and become a prolonged economic conflict. So what US can do, what are the US strategies? Pressuring and isolating China. US wants to isolate China. Okay, expand tariffs further, could push tariffs on all remaining Chinese imports, may include tech, medical equipments, or consumer electronics. Force bilateral deals. Okay, use the 90-day pause to secure trade deals with Europe, Japan, India, Latin America, etc. And propose create an anti-China trade bloc, isolating them economically. That is what they can do. Incentivize reshoring. Offer tax brackets and subsidies to bring supply chains back home or to allies. Target industries, semiconductors, EVs, pharmaceuticals. Tighten tech restrictions, ban US companies from selling advanced chip software or tools to Chinese firms, especially AI, quantum, 5G. Blacklist more companies like Huawei, SMIC. Sanctions and investment bans. So ban US investments in sensitive Chinese sectors. Broader sanctions if China is seen as manipulating currency or engaging in cyber theft. Okay, so we already talked about currency manipulation. So if China tries to do that, then this is what US can do. Now what China can do? Resilience and retaliation. Okay, so they can have tariffs as well. So hit potentially sensitive sectors, agriculture, energy in key US swing states. So see, swing states are those states which can easily change their parties. Okay, which they change, which are not completely democratic or which are not completely republican. So if tariffs happen on agriculture sectors or energy sectors, then key swing states might change their political opinion, which can hurt the Republican Party in mid-terms. Okay, then still domestic unrest and electoral pressure. Double down on reliance. Okay, and they can accelerate made in China 2025 chip making, clean energy, aerospace, AI. Reduce dependency on Western technology and inputs. Expand global trade web. Okay, so lean hard into RCEP. We talk about this Asia Pacific mega trade deal, BRICS, and Belt and Road. Okay, strengthen ties with Middle East, Africa, South America. Offer favorable deals to countries hurt by US tariffs. Okay, limit access to key resources, restrict exports of rare earths, solar panel. We already talked about this. Could target EV and green energy sectors in retaliation. Pressure US companies, internal or informal or formal retaliation against firms like Apple, Tesla, Qualcomm, Starbucks. We already talked about that. Could include consumer boycotts, regulatory audits, or market access threats. What to watch for next? So, supply chain shifts. Are US companies exiting China? That is what we should focus on. New alliance. Does China deepen ties with Russia or the global south? Currency moves, yuan weakening or capital control. Is that what China could do? Global coordination, do Europe or Japan pick a side or stay neutral? So that is what we can do. Okay. So this is basically the breakdown here. Okay. That what is happening up until now and what can happen in the future as.